This is a Film Stories original podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Xcast X-Files Podwatch. This is episode 102, and today we're going to be talking about Sunshine Days and the original series finale, The Truth. My name is Tony Black, and I'm joined by Darren Mooney once again.
Hello, how are things?
I'm all good, thank you very much. This is...
Has this killed you yet? I'm amazed this has not killed you yet. Not in a disparaging sort of way.
Well, we're near the end, and now we've only got like about another 4 or 5 episodes to go before we reach the end of the Podwatch. And you know, I mean, this has been a team effort, absolutely a team effort. In fact, I think this might be your last one, Darren.
And what a one to go out on!
Yeah, I know.
At least 1/3 of this is watchable.
But it's been a hell of a ride so far, and you know, I will in the final episode of the Podwatch, I will thank everyone who's been involved, because it's been a real legion of team effort in order to get us to this point where we've done over 100 episodes talking about every single X-File up until, as I said, what would have been the series finale before we had season 10 and obviously season 11, which is on the horizon. Yeah, before we get to that, though, before we delve into some truth, we're going to start off by talking about the penultimate episode of Season 9, which is Sunshine Days, which was written and directed by Vince Gilligan, and his last ever contribution to the X-Files to date. He's not coming back for Season 11, and if Season 11 is the final season, then this will be Vince Gilligan's last ever X-File. And I hadn't watched this for years. In fact, I probably hadn't watched this since I watched Season 9. So we're talking about 16 years now. For 15, 16 years. And I've got to say, it was a real oddity. Even for this show. I found it to be very, very strange.
I rewatched this recently as part of my own rewatch, coming at the end of the 9th season, and then I watched for this podcast again in isolation. And it's interesting to note that when you're watching the 9th season from beginning to end, this is like a welcome reprieve. This is like, oh my god, there's light at the end of the... This is amazing. And when you watch it in isolation, it's like, well, this is not awful. It's like... Yeah. It's like, I think it's, as far as like 9th season episodes go, this is not awful. Which is, it's kind of like a low bar to clear, but it clears it. The bar is sort of shaking a little bit, but it makes it.
Yeah, it's... I haven't done the 9th season in that way since... do you know, I still think there's 1 or 2 episodes I never watched of season 9, actually. So I'm not even sure I've seen every episode of the X-Files. I have such a little recollection of that final season. So it's going to be a while, I think, until I do that. You know,
Tony,
probably be...
No matter what anybody tells you, you don't need to do it. Just preserve your memory. You are looking at this from a place of somebody who is happy.
This is true. As we record this, we're about to start season 3 on the Xcast. So we're heading into the good years. So I'm a long way away from doing season 9. I think by then I will have either cloned myself, I will have upgraded into a robot consciousness, or I will just hire everyone else to do season 9. I will just edit by that point, and I'll come back for the truth.
If you could outsource editing, that would also probably be good. I think even people talking about the 9th season might contaminate you. I think this is one of those things where you only expose yourself to suffering.
I think you're probably right. And, you know, as we record this is the first season 9 episode that I will have been talking about. I think I might be down to do 1 or 2 others. So I think, yeah, I might yet have reached a point of despair already with season 9. But we'll see. Sunshine Days is I mean, I liked it for one. I liked a couple of things about it. I mean, Michael Emerson, it was nice to see him. This is his pre-Lost days before he played Ben Linus. And he's typically Michael Emerson, really, in the episode. And, you know, it's quite sweet. It's quite a sweet episode. It doesn't go in the direction you think. You know, it starts off obviously with a weird murder when a guy thinks he's on the Brady Bunch set, which is a weird concept in itself. But then you think it's well, I suppose it is a murder really. But then you think it's going to be quite
I like that.
It is a murder. How do you really quantify it? Like he gets levitated through a ceiling.
It's a moida.
It's just So, but it doesn't quite go. I don't think it quite goes in the direction you think with this character of Anthony.
No, it doesn't at all.
Or Oliver Martin, as he's called. But
it's really weird. It's one of those things that I think it suffers from a weird tonal shift in the middle. There's a sort of almost a clumsiness to the way that it's written, and you get a sense that like Gilligan had a bunch of stuff that he wanted to do, and basically had to suture it together. So you get the sense he wanted to do like the last standalone X-Files where they get proof of the paranormal and they have to sort of deal with that in a way. But he also wanted to do an episode about television through the form of the Brady Bunch. And so there's sort of this weird bit in the middle where it's sort of sutured together. And everybody kind of forgets that Oliver Martin is guilty of at least 2 homicides.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
like there's a sense, if I were Skinner being sort of levitated, like about, 2/3 of the way through the episode, I wouldn't be giggling. I'd be more like, okay, is the roof reinforced here? There's based on this guy's track record. Because, I mean, you could tell, like, what Gilligan wanted to do was he wanted to do, like, an ode to television. Like, there's a sense that, like, the Brady Bunch is... Obviously, it's a show about the Brady Bunch. I mean, they rebuilt some of the sets, and actually people came from all over Los Angeles to have their photos taken on the reconstructed sets, which is very cool. But it's also very clearly an episode about the X-Files, about, like, the X-Files as a television show, about, like, making sort of peace with it, like, a cult television show, and maybe even bidding farewell to it. And it's also at the same time wants to be a story about like giving some sense of closure to the X-Files in sort of a weird Monster of the Week way that isn't a sprawling 2-hour flashback-laden trial episode. Not to step on the toes of what we're going to talk about in a moment. But I think that like it does these things and it does them relatively well, but they don't gel together, and there's a sense that like you compact the two of them as a result of trying to do them both at the same time. Like I think there's a fascinating episode to be made about like what it's like for Gilligan, and I get the sense like some of the people I talk to at Sunshine Days, there's some people really like it, and some people are actually quite angry about certain aspects of it because they read a bit into what Gilligan's saying, with him saying basically, maybe he can learn to turn off the TV and live in the real world at the end, as Doggett observes of Oliver. And some people sort of took that as a take that at fans. I think that like when you look at coming after episodes like say early in the season you had Scary Monsters, which was an episode in which like a character who was designed to be like a stand-in for fans was just treated absolutely horribly. Like, I think I can understand why at the end of the 9th season there was a little bit of anxiety about that. But honestly, looking at the episode, I think Gilligan is largely sincere in that, like, Gilligan is not just writing Oliver as a super fan of the X-Files. Gilligan is writing Oliver as a guy who is writing for his favorite television show. Like, Oliver imagines the Brady Bunch and brings them to life. Like, that's not just what a fan does, that's what a writer working on a television show does. Like, he thinks about these people and they come to life, which is like what Gilligan does when he writes about the X-Files. And I think a large part of this is like Gilligan bidding farewell to that. It's like he's built entire worlds out of his mind. He's constructed entire stories. It was his first job in television. It was a show of which he was immensely fond even before he got invited to pitch the script that became Softlight, and then got sort of shoehorned onto the writing staff, and that sort of forced onto the writing staff in the 3rd season. Like I think that like it's a big deal for Gilligan, this episode, and I think there's a lot of affection in the way that he does it, because it's a very much a loving ode to television and the power of television, I think, which is very sweet at this point.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, really. And I think sweet is the word, and unexpectedly sweet, I think. But also, just, I don't know whether it was the fact that everyone was just a bit fed up or tired, or they just knew the end was coming, but everyone just seems very... like they're kind of like they've given up, really. It's very there's a lot of malaise with it. It's like there's no pace almost to the direction, to the script, to the performances. Everyone just seems a little bit dazed almost in a way, and maybe it is the fact that it's ending. And for Gillian Anderson especially, it must have been a really surreal time. This show that was her life, that made her as an actress, is over, and they know it's over, and there's only one more episode to go, and you just kind of feel that creeping through, really. So I found it to be a real oddity, and I'll confess, I found it to be a bit of a slog. Actually, I was checking the time of the episode, thinking, oh, it's 20 minutes left. Seriously, there's 20 minutes left. How and it wasn't because I wasn't not enjoying it as such, but I was thinking, there doesn't seem like enough to fill 45 minutes here.
Which is odd because I thought kind of the opposite in terms of like doing that. Like in the end, you get this weird transition at the halfway mark. Like, oh my god, Oliver proves the existence of the X-Files, and Skinner's like, oh well, they'll never be able to close the X-Files now. I want to go and drag Kirsch in front of this. And oh no, but wait, it turns out he can't use his powers because they're secretly killing him, and it just feels like it's too much heaped on for me almost. But I think you're right about sort of the sense of like lethargic, sort of the kind of the exhaustion that's there. And I think that oddly enough, and Tony, you're not going to believe me when I tell you this now, but I think that some of the listeners will concur with me, and I think that maybe when you've done a couple of other podcasts around this point, you'll maybe come to see things this way. But compared to some of the other ninth season episodes, this is practically like a roller coaster ride. This is like a high energy adventure.
Oh my god!
You've been spoilt with your fifth season episodes.
I have, and you know, going through the second season, you know, fully and everything. I've only been watching early X-Files or early to mid X-Files. Oh, I'm in for a
long haul.
A long haul, yeah.
I like that Gilligan tries his best to do right by all of the characters involved in this, even if it's only in the most superficial way. So you have like Scully talk about, well, if Mulder were here, then he would say X. Or you have like Doggett gets this really nice little moment where like Monica and Scully try and figure out like what the deal is with Oliver, but it's actually Doggett who's the skeptic of the bunch, who's still trying to get to grips with how the X-Files work, who understands intrinsically that Oliver is just looking for a father figure, which is something that Doggett would know, but the other characters really wouldn't, because Doggett has been a father and has lost a child, and he understands the sense of longing there. And in fact, he's just made peace with it and release. Like, I really like those little touches. That sort of like Gilligan didn't do enough work on, say, the 8th and 9th seasons because he was working on The Lone Gunman, but I really like his version of Doggett, as you see in like John Doe, or even going back to Roadrunners at the start of the 8th season. And I feel like while there's not enough time and not enough space in Sunshine Days for for Gilligan to do right by all of the characters as much as they need to, part of me feels like the characters in Sunshine Days get a better send-off than in the episode that we might be just about to talk about.
Well, yeah, you've queued up the segue here instead of me. But yes, the next episode we're going to talk about was originally the last. The Truth, which is the end of the... Well, obviously not the end, because then you had I Want to Believe, the movie, and then you have, of course, Season 10 and soon to be Season 11. But The Truth was supposed to be it. This was the big series finale, and... Obviously, the big thing about this is that Mulder comes back properly this time, instead of just like appearing like as an extra in the middle of a quarry in Trust No One, or then appearing in someone's eyeball like in William. It's actually David Duchovny. He's actually back, and the first time we see Mulder, he's breaking into Mount Weather, which is like the heart, the nexus of like the conspiracy fortress. In order to get the details on the alien colonization and everything like that. And I think the thing with The Truth, and obviously then he gets chased by Noel Rohr, the wonderfully named Noel Rohr, and ends up electrocuting him to death, in inverted commas. Although if there is less of of all the people that you could start an episode by killing off, surely Noel Rohr is the most ridiculous, because you obviously know he's not dead anyway. But yeah, what I do like about The Truth is the first 5 to 6 minutes and then the last 15. Everything else, shoot me now, basically. Except for,
I hope you like clip shows.
Yeah, exactly. Except for a couple of moments, like after Mulder gets arrested and he gets put in like a hole in the middle of Mount Weather or whatever, he gets a bit psychologically tormented by the guards who keep saying, "What are you thinking?" And they want him to basically admit that he's wrong. And I thought that was a good sequence. And then you've got moments like when X appears. And that's a really great moment when X turns up out of the shadows and tells him that basically it's futile. Everyone's doomed. But there are some nice little moments to it, much as they're contrived and everything like that. And like seeing the lone gunman cropping up, and while Mulder's having a piss, it's just typical, and Ghost Krychek and things like that. As much as it's just like the most fan service kind of stuff you could ever imagine, This whole episode is the most sort of fan fiction, fan service episode of the X-Files you could possibly imagine. I like that stuff. What I think is an absolute chronic waste of time is what you just said about the old clip show stuff, and the fact that they spend a good hour of, 45 minutes to 50 minutes of the very last episode of the X-Files telling us about all the better stuff that happened over the last 8 to 9 years.
There's a lot about the truth that I really don't like. Like, I really like the first 5 minutes, which are like, I hope you like action because this is all that you are going to get.
Well, yeah.
And it's got this kind of James Bond intro to it, which is very cool. And it's got like these really bright colours, which one of the things that there are very few things I like about the ninth season as a whole, but I really like the use of colour in, say, Nothing Important Happened Today Part 1 and the bit at the start of The Truth. We've got all these primary colour sort of pipes heading round and sort of this sort of nice government design, this sort of like Bond villain layer. It's like something that Blofeld designed, which is very, very cool.
Yeah.
But the problem with the trial sequences, and I think like the more I think about it, the more I think this is one of the big problems with the ninth season as a whole, is like, I remember when the show was out, and to be honest, it's a conception that still exists to this day when you talk about the X-Files. Like, there's a recurring suggestion by people who casually watch the show or watch the show like in its peak years and didn't necessarily stay with it, but that Carter never explained anything or never provided any answers, which is not what happened at all. Like, Carter generally provided answers and was generally quite reasonable at providing answers, to the point where, like, you could argue Two Fathers, One Son is an extended sort of explanation of everything that's happened in the mythology to this point. What Carter maybe didn't do as well was he didn't offer satisfactory answers, you could argue, and he also tended to complicate certain elements of his plotting as well. So stuff like, say, the bees, where the bees could be at once delivering smallpox, delivering black oil, possibly delivering both, delivering some weird hybrid. It was sort of left ambiguous. Maybe there were 2 types of bees, maybe there weren't. But like there is that sense of like, and then people sort of fixating on that. And I think if you looked at the press coverage from the time that the truth was coming out, there was a lot of like snarky coverage from, say, Slate or from the New York Times that was like, oh my God, is Carter going to ever answer any of these questions? And the answer is he answered all of them about 3 years ago. And I think the part of the issue with the ninth season as a whole, and it happens particularly with, say, William, where you get stuff like reintroducing the idea of the cigarette-smoking man after he last appeared in sort of Requiem. Like, you get the sudden that all of a sudden he's back and he's in the mythology in a big way because, his son's involved. And then we get sort of flashbacks and explanations that bring him back so that when he comes back at the end of The Truth, it's a big deal. Like, there's a sense that, like, with The Truth, what Carter's trying to do is trying to make an extended argument to say, look, it all made perfect sense. Sit down. Let me explain it to you. I'll take you through it frame by frickin' frame if I have to convince you that it makes sense. And, like, the irony is that nobody really cared because you still end up with this perception that exists that the X-Files doesn't make sense. Like, I think we've talked a bit on the podcast before. You are not a big fan of the last episode of Lost. I'm perhaps a little bit more sensitive to it, but one of the things I liked about the last episode of Lost was that they took the long explanation flashback episode and aired it basically as a special before the finale. Like, it wasn't part of the finale. It didn't sap the momentum. The sort of stuff like, this is all the stuff that you need to remember about the show. That wasn't in the show, and it didn't sort of take away. You could actually watch the narrative as an hour of television. Whether or not it made sense, I think, yeah, it didn't really make sense, but at least it had a flow to it that The Truth really doesn't have. The Truth is like an inconvenient truth, except it's by somebody who has religiously watched The X-Files for 9 years.
Well, you mentioned in Lost, I did recently do a full rewatch of Lost, and I do have... I always liked the finale. I wasn't sure about the final reveal of the finale.
But sorry, apologies.
But no. It's fair enough because I have warmed a bit more to the whole thing since watching it again. Watching that show, as over the course of like 2 months back to back, I realise what a beautiful tapestry the whole thing is, and I've always loved Lost hugely anyway. But I know what your point is, and I think that the crucial difference is that what the X-Files completely gets wrong, and thankfully this wasn't the finale, ultimately, in the end. Obviously the show has carried on, so this isn't the end of the end. But what it doesn't do is tell a compelling story. It spends, like you said, so long with Chris Carter trying to justify everything that people have been shouting at him for the last, decade, that it forgets to actually tell a story when it could have done. I mean, the first 5-10 minutes with Mulder, like you're saying, doing all this sneaking around is great. If I'd have had an episode like that, I'd have been over the moon. Of Mulder and Scully back together, going on, effectively like an undercover mission to because there were a lot of balls in the air at this point. You've got the super soldiers in the FBI, you've got Kirsch, involved in all that. You've got, You know, people still in play. I think people like Gibson Praise, you know, who obviously pops up in this episode. You've got, you know, the uncertainty of whether the X-Files are going to get closed. You've got Mulder on the run. You know, you've got a lot going on. You've got William. You've got all these things that are obviously they sorted William out by this point, but they could have had him more involved, like he's probably going to be in season 11. But like all these things that were circling around that you could have done stuff with, and you could have made a really exciting big finish, like a movie, a mythology-style movie. And they don't. And then you obviously get the last like 10, 15 minutes, which, you know, brings back the Smoking Man, which I do like. I do like it, even if it's in its own way preposterous.
Well, I mean, the cigarette smoking man sequence, like, it is preposterous. It's ridiculous that he survived as much as he did, and it's ridiculous how far the show goes to demonstrate that he is dead. When, of course, you find out that he is not dead.
Or he's not dead.
Yeah. But, like, the truth literally shows the skin being seared off his skull. It
really does.
But I like, aside from like the absurdity of that setup and the fact that like the entire budget of the 2-part episode seemed to have been spent on building some ruins that they could then blow up, so we have to spend the good hour of the episode in a room with a window and a bunch of low-rate actors with David Duchovny. Like, I think I like the idea of the confrontation, the final confrontation between Mulder and the cigarette smoking man, because it's that sort of mythic like atonement with the father sort of thing, which is this idea of Mulder going on a journey, coming a full circle and coming back. One of the things I really don't like about the episode, and like ignoring the flashback stuff, which is just terrible television, is the recurring sense that the episode makes Mulder complicit in the conspiracy and the mythology. Like, Mulder discovers the date of alien colonization at the start, which it isn't even as big a reveal as the episode makes it out to be, because I think that in back in like Patient X and the Red and the Black, they give an idea of when the date's happening, and then it's cemented again sometime later on as well. But I think that like Mulder keeps that secret and lets that secret defeat him, and lets that sort of like turn him inwards and sort of like make him like he doesn't tell Scully what it is until the last possible minute. He doesn't expose it. He's not willing to let people know that the date has been set or the end is coming. Like, there's this weird sense that like Mulder in some ways becomes a conspirator almost at the end of the X-Files. Like, he's given this information and he chooses not to share it. And like the cigarette smoking man makes the accusation in the cave, which is, you know, basically you made the same decision that I did, which is like you were confronted with something that was unalterable and like you blinked like I did. And the thing is, the truth never really responds to that. The truth never really offers a moment of counter to that. Like, the thing that it does, and it's very clearly designed to set up like a feature film sequel, which is really frustrating. Another slightly frustrating thing about the truth is the truth ends with Mulder and Scully on the run together, which is not the end, not necessarily an ending to a 9-year-long series about the search for truth. It's a setup going into a feature film that never materialized. I think that even when I Want to Believe materialized, they throw out that idea. It's like, yeah, you know the way that you were kind of like involved in the execution of Noel Rohr and are a wanted fugitive and were sentenced to death. We need you to help us find a pedophile. Yeah, maybe there's some weird stuff happening with some dead bodies. Maybe we can get a pardon for you.
Yeah.
It's like 24.
Don't worry about
it all
that.
over the place now. Yeah. Forget about it. Exhibit's cool with that. But like, it's really jarring, and you get even then at the very end, you end up with this weird sort of Carter monologue on faith, which is the idea that like the truth that we sought all along, you know, was some sort of divine or religious truth. It was almost this belief in God, and like, I'm a bigger fan of Carter's spirituality than most people, in that I quite like the Sixth Extinction trilogy, for example. Like, I think that there's some interesting stuff there. I love Improbable, even earlier in the ninth season, which is an episode that is explicitly about the role of God in the universe. But I feel like the truth is a massive cop-out, because the truth at the end of the truth, title drop, turns out to be basically God did it, or God is going to do it, or God will do it, or God will take care of us. And it's like it's not that I'm anti-religious or I'm atheist. I'm agnostic and I'm open to this, and I like religious themes in my work. I think Deep Space Nine is probably the best Star Trek. It's more that it's used so clumsily and so awkwardly and so shoehornedly into it. Like, Carter's recurring theme of like ghosts are the voice of conscience reaching out from the past to talk to us, which is something he established back in Piper Maru, but arguably played even as early as the first season, and literally comes to bear here with stuff like Krychek and Mr. X, who help Mulder sort of escape. Like, they're not just like representations of his psyche, because they give him information that he couldn't otherwise have, and Krychek at one stage opens or closes a door for him. But there's this sense that, like, that's an interesting idea in the context of what the X-Files is about, because the X-Files is about memory and history and remembering those voices of conscience that speak from history. But it feels like tying all of that to a very religious and very Christian idea of like God the Almighty staring down on Mulder and Scully and keeping them safe and protecting mankind from an alien invasion feels like an ending to a different show than the one we are watching.
Yeah, it does. And it's a lot of convenience in the truth. There's a lot of convenient elements. There's a lot of, like I said, fan service. There's a lot of paying things off without paying them off at all, and teeing up, like you said, a sequel movie that never happens, and then a season 10 which completely ignores all of this basically and decides to retcon a lot of stuff.
I am cooler with that than most people.
Well, me too, actually. Me too, right? And so I don't have as massive a problem with it, but I think it's just a bad finale. You know, however you slice it, it's not how you end a show like this. Definitely.
No.
And
9 years.
9 years. Yeah. If only we can just erase season 9, then maybe everyone would have been happier. Luckily, that isn't the end of the story. Tomorrow, we'll be back covering the Podwatch will be back covering the second movie, I should say, I Want to Believe, and that's going to get its own episode on its own before we go into season 10, and then we reach the end and we start thinking about season 11. How exciting! So until then, Darren, thanks for being part of the Podwatch. This is your last episode, so you'll be back for our ongoing coverage of stuff to come. So until then, where can we find you?
You can find me online at Darren_Mooney. You can find me at the Movie Blog with a 0 rather than an O. You can also find me hosting the 250, which is a weekly / fortnightly movie podcast in which myself and my friend Andrew Quinn discuss the top 250 movies of all time as voted for by IMDb users. That's available on the Black Hole Media Podbean. Just want to say, Tony, it has been a huge pleasure. It's been immense. It's been great having an excuse to rewatch those. Not that I need an excuse to rewatch those, but thank you very much for having me, basically, is what I'm saying.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. The pleasure is absolutely mine. And I mean, I've only got one more as well. I've only got the very final episode of the Podwatch to come. So, yeah, we're nearly there. We're nearly there, guys. Hang on in there. You've done very well listening for over 100 days. So, yeah, brilliant. Awesome. You can follow me at AJ Black Writer on Twitter, and you can follow the Xcast at the X_cast on Twitter, and then check out our Facebook and page, Facebook group and page as well. Until we return to talk about I Want to Believe, always remember the immortal words: trust no one.